This is officially the first episode of What's Left. It has taken me so long to actually sit down and record a podcast episode. I was waiting to get a camera, but I was like, you know what? Screw that. I'm just going to record. I'm literally recording on my MacBook, and I have had my mics sitting here for a while. I think with the TikTok ban, it's just really pushing me to do longer form content and push things on YouTube. So I'm definitely happy to be behind the mic again. I've had a podcast in the past, Celery Talks, because I did like a holistic health coaching certification and I talked about all things wellness, because outside of this kind of content, I am very much focused on wellness and fitness in my own personal life. Maybe not so much now that I'm going into surgery, but I digress. We are here for What's Left, the first episode, where we're going to talk about very similar content to what I post on my TikTok account. I think that this episode is just going to be me kind of ranting and talking about the TikTok ban first, and then also migrating to other social media platforms, because I think a lot of people are really curious on where to find their favorite creators, questions about RedNote, questions about Instagram, questions about YouTube. Where can we find all of these people? I definitely think we are down in crunch time. People are suspecting that Trump is going to come in and save TikTok, which does make me a little bit skeptical, because I'm like, he of course wants to be our savior. It's very much like the toxic ex-boyfriend that's like, I'm going to treat you like garbage. I'm going to threaten to take away your favorite thing. They take it away, but then they come in and they swoop and they save you. They give you gifts. They try to make you feel the most comfortable. So I don't feel very optimistic about if he were to do that, but we shall see. We don't know what this guy is really going to do when he takes office. And I literally got in a verbal tussle with Trump supporters this morning, because as you know, I am very vocal. I am not just vocal on the internet. I am not just vocal on social media. I am vocal in my workplace. I'm vocal in real life. So I literally said, I hope you get what you voted for, because it's about to get pretty bad. And he was like, yep, better than what it is now. And I was like, okay, well, and there was a woman standing there, and I was like, voting against your own best interest and voting against my interest is really suspect. And I hope you get what you voted for. And she was just going on and on, why don't you mind your own business? And literally on their car, it said, we the people. And I was like, because I'm the people. I'm minding my business. Minding my business, you voting against my own rights and best interest is literally me, the people. Don't you stand with me too? And so it's just becoming this point where everything is so intense. It feels like it's bubbling over. TikTok is getting potentially banned. Trump is taking office. A stream of income of mine is going away. My grandmother literally just died, and my employer, don't even get me started about my employer. I do not talk much about my job and what I do professionally, because I don't really think that it matters. I mean, we all have to exist under capitalism, but of course, everything that I talk about and all my criticisms about men, about patriarchy, about heteronormative culture, about capitalism, all of that is extremely relevant if you work in the office and you have to play the monkey dance of fitting in. And clearly I am not somebody that fits in. So it all just comes to a head. I mean, it's a really difficult time for a lot of people. I think it's a really difficult time for women specifically. I think it's a really difficult time for anyone who's not white. I think that everyone is feeling the brunt and the severity of reality living in America, and everyone going over to RedNote are having their eyes open to say, oh my gosh, life in China is not what everyone else said. I'm sorry. You can probably hear Eric. We used to do vintage furniture, and we were on our walk this morning. They had this old record player outside, and we were like, oh, are you giving this away? He was like, yeah, I'll deliver it to your house for free. And we were like, sweet, we'd like to take that. So someone delivered it, and Eric is gonna sand it down and do all that. So if you're hearing the banging in the background, Eric is redoing furniture, which that's a whole other thing. Everything in my house is pretty much thrifted for the most part. I did this art. It's not the best art on planet Earth. I got this couch that I'm sitting on at an estate sale. So, I mean, we try to be thrifty as where we can. But I just think that it's going to be a very interesting time for people moving forward, and we have to be able to protect ourselves. That's why I am so sad to see all of the comments on my TikTok account saying, you've changed my perspective, you changed my life. I don't want people to feel cut off by these perspectives or by creators that they feel like they resonate with. Essentially, that's why they want to get rid of it. They don't want us talking to each other. And to me, I'm like, oh, well, if TikTok goes dark, maybe I just go dark. Maybe I don't post on Instagram because the hate comments aren't worth it. Maybe I don't move over to RedNote because it's so overwhelming to even consider. But then again, if I go dark, that is me not standing in my values, what I advocate publicly. I think our silence is not going to protect us, as Audre Lorde said. So if I go silent, what good does that really do? Is it exhausting? Yes. Is it hard work? Yes. I know that people shit on creators all the time and say, what work do you actually do? Like, I can't even tell you how many side comments get made because I work in corporate America, and not everyone knows that I am an online creator. Not everyone knows that I have been in social media for over a decade. So they'll make side remarks and say, oh, like, I don't really understand why people are so upset about TikTok. Like, maybe this is a good thing. It's really addictive, blah, 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 blah. And to me, I'm standing there and I'm going, you have no idea that I have been able to bring in extra income because of this app. Not only do I get to stand in my integrity and voice the opinions that I feel are doing good for people's lives, but I also am able to get income from simply just existing, from simply just sharing my perspectives. And people who do not understand that, they think that social media is so frivolous, and it is not. What is the word? It's suspicious to me that women specifically outperform men on social media. Influencer marketing, influencer content creating is all pretty much dominated by women. So of course, right when women start outperforming men in an industry, let's shut that one down first. Let's shut it down. And that doesn't like go over my head, if you will. Like, it's very obvious to me that is part of this narrative. Of course, they're like saying that it's a national security issue and they want to pretty much just control the narrative. And so I think that when women, minorities, people who are not straight white men start dominating the conversation, all of the sudden that is a problem. All of the sudden, oh, that's really risky. All of the sudden, misinformation is being spread left and right. But traditional media has been spreading lies for the entirety of its existence, essentially, and nobody has gone upset about that. Oh, wait, because the government and the traditional media are all in cahoots with each other. So yeah, when the average person just starts speaking about their lived experience, a woman starts speaking about her lived experience, all of a sudden we need to quiet those people, because no, we can't have people connect with each other and say, oh my gosh, me too. This is exactly why corporations do not want their employees talking to one another. I live in the state of California, and I can't tell you how many times an employer has said, please don't discuss what you get paid with other people, blah, 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 blah. Like, keep things confidential, X, Y, and Z. And I always felt threatened by that. As a young person in the workplace, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I need to like build a foundation for my career. I can't really step on any toes. I didn't really know my rights. Okay, so I listened to them. Come to find out, you can talk to your coworkers about what you get paid. You can share with your coworkers what is going on with you. You are allowed to speak to your coworkers. They tell you that to scare you, to keep you from talking. They do not want us to have a sense of community. They do not want to have us have a safe space. They don't want any of that. And I think that the lesson that I have learned the most is you need to do everything you possibly can to protect yourself. I advocate that for women in relationships. I advocate for that for women in the workplace. I advocate that women start being so wildly selfish that they think about their best interest before anybody else's. I think oftentimes we live in a reality where we are so fearful to protect ourselves that we just go with the flow. We don't try to ruffle any feathers. We just try to keep our head down, try not to make a scene, because then that way we are safest. And I agree. I think in some situations, women will be safer. We have to do what we can. I think proximity to men, some women need in order to survive given external factors that are so far out of their control. And my perspective is that if you have the ability, if you have resources, safety, friends, network, peers, colleagues that you feel like you can be safe with, that is when you are able to be a little bit more truthful and stand in your integrity and stand in your confidence. The minute you know your worth, men and employers will absolutely despise you. They will villainize you. Oh, you're bitter. Oh, you're jaded. Oh, you're aggressive. Oh, you're this. Oh, you're that. That is to silence you. And for me, for a very long time, that worked. That worked to silence me because I didn't really have anything to fall back on. I had issues with my family. I felt really disconnected. I felt really disjointed. I felt really ostracized. I felt very much alone. And when you're alone, that is when you are the perfect victim. That is when you are the most malleable. That is when you are able to be manipulated. The minute you stand in your integrity, you build resources for yourself, you will be a threat to the system. You will be a threat to men. You will be a threat to capitalism. You'll be a threat to your employer. The minute you start advocating for what you're worth, they go, oh no, I can't play with this one. They want to pick on people who are the easiest to exploit, the easiest to extract labor from. And I hope that over time, with people opening their minds, widening their minds, women specifically are going to be less controllable. They want us controlled. This brings me to the entire conversation about being child free. Oh my gosh, I cannot tell you how many times on the internet I have gotten dragged for my opinions on being child free or what I think is required in order to have children. Of course, there's always nuance. There's always nuance that there's not access to birth control, there's not access to sex education, there's not access to all of these things. But I think that our programming of social norms, of heteronormative norms, of nuclear family norms, like if you are thinking to yourself and you know that you do not have the resources to have a child, but you want to have a child, by doing so, to me, is extremely selfish. And when you have a child and you follow these norms and you create a nuclear family, you are much more of a consumer. You are ostracized from your community because you're so hyper focused on your reality. I have no idea what that edit was. But you are extracting resources as well. Like, you are expecting the world to bend to you. And I think when you do not have children, you do not have to stay at a job. You do not have to necessarily buy a house in the suburbs. You don't have to do these things that the government, these corporations want you to be doing. They want you to be stuck in the rat race. And I feel like I'm sounding very much escape the matrix vibes, but I saw a TikTok recently, of course, before it gets banned, I'm like soaking it in while I can. I saw a TikTok that said like the ultimate hack to the matrix is staying child free, because if you don't have children, you are uncontrollable. You are ungovernable. People have talked about this so openly online, and I completely agree. I think that as a woman who's not centering men, a woman who does not want to get married, a woman who does not want to have children, I am that woman. I am less likely to be controlled because I go, what's in it for me? I'm okay with being deemed selfish. I think that if a woman is declared selfish, I'm like, oh, she a baddie. Yep, she knows her worth. She's not gonna let anyone take advantage of her, essentially. And so my entire point, what I try to get across, is that I think that women should be able to have the choice across the board. If you want to have kids, by all means have kids. If you don't want to have kids, I hope that you have that choice. I wish that we could have more informed choices for women, because the more information you have, of course, you're going to be able to make a better decision for yourself. But if we're constantly just going through the motions and everything is on autopilot, we're not asking any questions. I feel like this childlike mentality, people think that, oh, if you're asking questions, if you're questioning authority, if you're speaking up, if you're doing all of these things, like, oh, you're just not mature, you just don't know how the world works, you just don't know how to, you have no social awareness. Like, they say this so often about neurodivergent people, and I'm like, no, I feel like I'm hyper aware of society. I feel like I'm hyper aware of the tools of manipulation, and I'm hyper aware of the systems that oppress me. So for example, as a child, I would always stand up to my father because he would say things, he would try to discipline me in ways or tell me I was doing something wrong, and I was, why? What did I do wrong? How is this harmful? Just trying to get more information so that I can understand moving forward how to avoid a scenario if I'm being spanked or if I'm being punished or if I'm being disciplined. And that didn't go away when I would be spanked to just silence me. I have carried that into my adulthood. I carry that in my relationships. I carry that through conflict resolution, and I carry that in the workplace. And I think oftentimes, specifically women in the workplace, when you are confident, outspoken, very declarative of what you think is right and the skills that you bring to the table, you're aggressive, you're not flowery enough, you're not this, you're not that. And then when you start asking questions, oh, you're not a team collaborator, they don't want to address the huge elephant in the room for so many people. I think that when you have such robust pattern recognition paired with lived experience, paired with hypervigilance, because I would argue every woman on the planet has to be hypervigilant in order to protect ourselves, because we are a victim from men left and right. Like, we have no idea. Even the men you think that you are going to be the safest with, the ones you lay in bed with at night, are not safe. We always have to be on alert. And that makes me think about having a woman's intuition. And I've talked about this before, but I think having like a woman's intuition, I do think we innately and inherently have this connection to an unseen realm, like a spiritual realm. I think that we are God herself, but I also think that a lot of that is because of lived experience. I think it's the nature versus nurture, and for a women's experience, I think that it's both. I think that nature forces us to be so aware of when we're walking at night and who's walking too close behind us, holding our keys in our hand. And I think that if you come from a traumatic household or parents that were emotionally immature, I think hypervigilance is just second nature. Like, for example, I can be at work and people can be walking down the hall and I know exactly who it is based on their footsteps. And I don't know that everyone picks up on that. I think that some people do, because I think more information you have, the better off you are to protect yourself or be prepared for what is to come. But I think some people don't even think twice about it. But if you lived in a household where you had to know whose footsteps were coming in order to make sure that you could self-preserve, that was a method of survival. And I don't think that that goes away all that quickly. And I have done talk therapy over the course of my adult life. And I think that these are also controversial opinions that I have about talk therapy, but I think that talk therapy can only get you so far, because your lived experience is your map, is your blueprint for how you will show up in the future. So you can talk about things, you can talk them to death. Eric and I talk about this all the time. We will take a topic, we will talk it to death, because we want to dissect the intersections, the all of the micro details that lead up to something. Are we missing something, so that we can see it from a holistic perspective? And you can do that with a therapist. I think that it is a great space to feel heard if you do not feel like you are being heard in your personal life, but that only takes it so far. And for me personally, I think that other modalities need to be paired in order to psychologically equip yourself to deal with these scenarios. For me, it's plant medicine. For me, it's nutrition, it's movement, it's friendship, it's community, it's art, it's artistic expression, it's all of these sorts of things. And I think when you start talking about them openly, people are like, "Oh my gosh, you're so dramatic. Like this is so woo woo. This is so crazy." And I'm like, "No, this is actually just what it means to be human." Hi, Frank. Frank has joined us. We have a special guest today, and it is Miss Frank. So I think that it's a really challenging time to not feel dissociated when it comes to the TikTok ban, with Trump's inauguration, with what is to come. Just living in America, the cost of living is astronomical. People are losing their jobs left and right. Like, I think that it's really challenging, and I want people listening, I want people who resonate with me to hopefully find me on these new platforms. I want to, just as much as I know other people need to feel heard and to feel seen, I do as well, which is kind of why I started to post on TikTok in the beginning. I posted a very vulnerable and intimate moment between my family dynamic, and I had gone through very challenging times, and I was very open about what it is to deal with boomers, especially like emotionally immature boomers, and that being a woman, like my mother being a role model to me as a young person, being emotionally immature, being in this very turned on its head gender roles relationship of my parents. Like, there are just so many things I think that go into it. And so when you start posting online, you start sharing your story, you start bringing in people who will resonate with you. And I think for me on TikTok, I have had my fair share of hate, and I know that that's never going to go away. And oftentimes people say, "Oh, if you're a creator, you're asking for that." You know, like you by putting yourself out there, you are going to get harassed. You deserve to be harassed. And while I do think that we should all be available for criticism, I don't think that anyone is free from criticism. We can always be better people. Nobody is perfect. I think that putting yourself in a vulnerable position comes with the negatives, but it also comes with the positives. And I think as people who were black sheep and still are black sheep in their families know exactly what I'm talking about. I think living as a queer person in life, you feel that way. I think living as a woman, you feel that way. I think living as a trans person, you would feel that way. If you just don't feel like you fit into the norm, it is going to be extra hard for you. And so I think moving into this new era of getting our communities stripped away on the digital space and trying to find corners of the internet that are going to bring us that sense of safety again is going to be a very challenging time. I don't think it's going to be seamless. I think that people are scared. I myself am scared. I literally in my personal life constantly ask, what are we going to do to protect ourselves? What are we going to do moving forward? Are we going to stay here? Are we going to move out of the country? What are we going to do for our streams of income? Like, the world is spinning so quickly. So many things are happening so fast. And I think that people are so fearful of change. And for me, my perspective is all I've ever known is change. And I think that that is a lesson that a lot of people learn over the course of their life, is the only constant thing in life is change. And so you have to learn to adapt to that. But that doesn't mean that in the moment it's not uncomfortable. That doesn't mean in the moment that it's not scary. It doesn't mean in the moment that you have to grieve alongside also putting action forward, because if you don't, you might end up in a worse off position. But I will say, from my 30 years of lived experience, is that things can change overnight. What my life looked like a year ago to what it looks like today is so beyond, is so wildly different. I had just moved back from Mexico. I had been freelancing for years. I was really interested in having a very stable sense of income. I wanted to immerse myself back into just like what I thought was normal, even though looking at it now, it is anything but normal. And knowing that even when I wanted a sense of normality, I still was posting on TikTok. I was like doing other avenues of self expression where I'm never going to be normal. Some of us are never going to be normal. And I think that the sooner we figure out how to support each other in that, to find safe spaces in that, the better off we're going to be. I was just talking with multiple people. I went and got coffee with one of my old colleagues, and she's currently looking for a job, and I just kind of recommended a couple of opportunities that I knew of. And I always have all of these very grandiose ideas because to me, the world is our oyster. I see opportunities left and right. I know that we're going through very challenging economic times, but I think as artists, as people who are constantly thinking, again, as neurodivergent people who are just spinning and finding patterns, I'm like, how cool would it be if we were able to bring back third spaces that brought together so many different people's sense of expertise? And I was sharing about how I had met this gal in Mexico, and she liked to curate like gastronomy and catered events and that sort of thing, but they were very small and very intimate and very community based. So you would like buy a ticket at whatever price that would be, and you would meet new people. It was like a networking opportunity, it was a friendship building opportunity, it was even like it could potentially even be a dating opportunity because you never know who you were going to meet. And so in my mind, I'm like, how do we captivate and encompass a lot of the strength, the power, the community, the safety we felt on TikTok and bring that into real life? And I think that it's really frustrating because everything revolves around capitalism, and then people get like analysis paralysis or say, oh my gosh, I don't have the resources. But with something like a TikTok, people were able to blow up overnight. People were able to attract like-minded people like that. And I think it's going to be very interesting what's going to come. I think that some people are hopeful and some people are not hopeful, but watching everyone's goodbyes on TikTok of just like, you can tell some people are really disheartened. People are really scared for the future, and people are being very vulnerable, opening up like, if this is a goodbye and I lose this community is what has kept me going. This community has paid my bills. This community has taken me out of debt or paid off my credit cards or put me through school, or all of these sorts of things, like life-changing things. For me, life-changing things have come from my TikTok account. Other entities have reached out to me and said, oh my gosh, is there an opportunity to do collaboration? People have recognized me. I am not kidding. I went to Mexico City over the holiday. I by no means think that my platform is big in comparison to TikTok creators, but I did feel as though what I was saying was really impactful, and that was important to me. And so I went to Mexico City over the holidays, and I was coming back on the plane, and I wear a mask every single time I go on a plane, and I'm watching TikTok, and like this whole controversy with me was happening. And so of course I was just like very dialed in. I was very much reading the comments, which was so bad for my mental health, but I couldn't not look because the conversation was revolving around me and then became way bigger than me. But this woman eventually, like an hour into the flight coming back, she was like, are you Professional Sassatron? And I was like, oh my gosh, yes, I am. And I literally had like my account open, so maybe that's how she knew, but I had a mask on. I don't know how she recognized me. And so we just got to chatting. She lived like close by to where I lived, and she was creating these in-person groups where multi-generations of women can come together, share their lived experience, do witchy crafts, and all of the sort of things. And we were just talking about a lot of the things that were really relevant at the time. 4B, Trump getting elected, like what's going to happen for women in the future, being a divorcee, being a single mother, like how all of this encompasses a woman's lived experience, and how refreshing it is to have women speak vulnerably about what is going on, having women speak vulnerably about, if I knew what it took to be a mother, maybe I wouldn't be a mother, or being a divorcee, maybe I would have never married a man. Dating them is great, dating them is so fun, but I would never build a life with a man. So I think that for me, I never really realized the power of speaking out, because oftentimes my lived experience was that if you speak out, you're punished. If you speak out, you lose relationships, you lose connection. Every single time I thought that standing up for what is right meant something negative was going to happen to me. And my presence on TikTok, my experience on TikTok, my time on TikTok really reminded me that so many people are in fact people. They're people with lived experience. There are people that are going to resonate with you, agree with you, appreciate you simply by just speaking up for your perspective, your truth, your reality, what you believe is right. Oftentimes, you will find those people. And it's really interesting. I quoted Audre Lorde earlier, and I quoted her recently on my Instagram account saying, "Your silence will not protect you." And I totally believe that. I think that I started reading her book, and some of her perspective is like, you might be out for assassination. If you speak the truth, people that do not want that truth to be heard will go to the grave in order to silence you, which is what we're seeing on a massive scale. So not only does it happen in your interpersonal relationships, in your private life, with your relationships, your friends, your boyfriends, your partners, your lovers, your employers, your anyone, if they don't want you to stir things up, if they do not want your truth to come out because that is not in their best interest, they will do everything they can to silence you, and they'll do it in ways that are not right, that are not fair, that are not just, and they want you to go quietly into the night by not being a squeaky wheel. And I refuse to go quietly into the night. I mean, I think that if that comes at a cost of my physical and mental health, of course there's always a balance, but it just reminds me of the 2020, there was lockdowns, there was BLM protests that were happening, especially in San Francisco. So Eric and I were in San Luis Obispo, and then we went to San Francisco, and we were participating very actively in a lot of these protests, these activism events. And these people that I thought were my friends, that I thought were like-minded, were very, very hesitant to be all in. They wanted to participate because they wanted the perception and to be perceived of doing what was right, but they didn't want to do and put themselves in positions that required them to put their body on the line, to really stay up a little bit later than they were supposed to, or pay more money, or donate money in ways that they wanted to. It's really putting your money where your mouth is. And I remember people would say, "Oh my gosh, like it's a marathon, not a sprint, like take care of yourself." This weaponization of therapeutic talk, like that's why I think talk therapy, we could do a whole episode on the negative side of talk therapy, but I think that people use that often of like, I'm not a perfect person, or it's a marathon, not a sprint, to excuse them and apologize for not doing enough in some people's mind. And I totally understand the nuance that everybody has certain capacities and everyone has their place in the revolution, but I think that people become lazy because capitalism, to fall back on that, if you're comfortable, it's easier to do what is known, to do what is comfortable, to do what is familiar, than it is to disjoint the system. It is always going to be uncomfortable and create discomfort to do things that are so beyond what we know. There the banging goes again. But I just think that you can filter out very quickly who is really about making progress, doing what's right, and advocating, and that's going to filter people out. I think that happens when you try to unravel generational trauma. I think that happens when you grow apart from your friends, and I have experienced this so many times. I experienced death at a very young age of my parent. Like, I just think that these world-shaping experiences change the way that you see the world. I think that when you move beyond your small town, if you go away to college, if you try to start businesses, like this narrative was always around me of, oh, Ashley's failure to launch. You've tried to do all of these things. I had a travel blog. I did a vintage resale business. I have a digital agency. I've worked at corporations. I've tried so many things. I've had a podcast before. I posted on TikTok. Like, I have really tried to self-express in so many different ways. And I think when you're multi-talented and multifaceted, which women are, I think, just inherently, you are up for criticism. We are never going to be free of criticism, even if you are doing all the right things. Even if you do the status quo and you follow the nuclear family, you're going to be criticized for doing that. If you don't, you're going to be criticized. So you might as well just do whatever the fuck you want. But with that being said, you always need to be around people who are like-minded. And I think that when you are very polarizing, I find myself to be a very polarizing person for people. Some people love me, some people hate me. There's not really an in-between, which is okay with me, because I would rather be someone's cup of tea and someone to be like, no, absolutely not, stay away from me. And I'm like, perfect. If you want me to stay away from you, then I probably want you to stay away from me. So I think that when you start carving out these experiences and spaces for yourself, yeah, can it be really isolating? Sure. But is it really instilling confidence that you know who you are, you know what you like, you know what you'll put up with, and you know what you won't put up with? That to me is so, so, so invaluable. And I think that's what the power of TikTok was essentially, is that people were having exposure to things that they weren't before. I mean, I'm trying to think of like all of the life hacks of like all the things that your mother didn't teach you, or how to do your laundry properly, or how to source vintage stuff on eBay, how to properly brush your teeth or wash your body, all of these things, how to take care of your skin, perfecting your skincare routine, how to start a podcast, how to start being a content creator, what books to read. Like there was so much information available, and I think that people were really getting a stronger sense of who they are and what they want in life, the direction that they'd like to push themselves into. And of course, when that came with additional income, because we are going without so deeply in America and there's no awareness of how the rest of the world works, people were like, wow, I get to just exist, and value comes from that. And not only that, but I attract a community of people that bring me value into my life and I bring value to them. It was a very much a symbiotic relationship. And I think with the conversations of, is Meta going to take over? Are people going to move back to Instagram? Instagram and some of these other platforms, I have never really posted on YouTube, so I don't know much about YouTube, but I'm really excited to find out. Other entities are just stripping value from consumers, from people just existing, from their employees. Like there is never this symbiotic, we need to invest in community, we need to invest in people, because if we do, more value will come of that. And I think that that really radicalized people. I think that it is such an invaluable experience to exist and be paid to exist. And then you realize, wow, I don't have to do backbreaking work. I remember there was a video of this influencer who was talking about how her dad was always working class. I think that he made like $70,000 per year, and she started posting on TikTok, and her TikTok account really started to grow. And she was an influencer and just kind of like yapping and dressing cute and being cute and doing what existing. And she was like, when I got my first brand deal, I think it was with like Louis Vuitton or something, I realized that making money is not tied to hard work. You do not have to work hard in order to make money. I think that we are sold this idea that like, if you're not working hard enough, that is why you are worse off, when that is quite literally just the propaganda to keep us attempting to provide our labor for the people who aren't doing any work. It makes me think about the billionaire class, or laying people off, or cutting costs here and doing this and doing that. And if you think about the most successful people, they are not working harder than the person who's washing the toilets at a restaurant, for example. Like it just is all about perception. And I think that people being online, people being on TikTok were like, wow, I get to be creative and strategic on how I can do this, how I can craft a life for myself that maybe doesn't even require a specific level of exploitation. I think under capitalism, all of it requires exploitation, but I think in people's minds, TikTok was less exploitative because they were deciding when they posted, they were deciding what brand deals they were taking, they were deciding a lot of these different things. And that sense and level of freedom is very threatening to a system that expects you to not be free, expects you to be caged, expects you to stay small and lack self-confidence, in the same way that men go after young girls. They go after young girls because they have no life experience. They may lack a little bit of confidence because they're not sure who they are yet. And the broader environment does that, and it does it to men too. This is why we say all the time that patriarchy also harms men. They just don't realize it. It makes me think of when I was just sharing about how I got in this like little tussle with the Trump supporters, where I'm like, they literally think they're right. They think they're right. They think they're righteous. They think they're doing the right thing and that they are going to be better off. And not only is them supporting someone like that harming me, it's harming them without them knowing. They are so blinded by their own actions being what is a reason why they are not living a comfortable life, or a more comfortable life, or a safer life, or all of these sorts of things, that the reality is so warped that they cannot see that they are part of their own problem. And I think about how this correlates to pick-me's, where pick-me's don't realize that they are a part of their own problem. They are a part of their own subjugation. They are a part of perpetuating norms that harm them. I think that we think that, oh, our oppressor is going to save us. Oh, we think that X, Y, and Z is going to be our preservation and our protection. And it's really not. And this is why I advocate so deeply for women to invest in other women, for women to find friends with other women. And I think this is why I've been back from living abroad and freelancing for like a year and a half now, and there are pros and cons of doing both. There are pros and cons of doing everything, and I think the one of the biggest things that I look back on when I was living abroad and I was freelancing and I was around a lot of other creative people, and I was just experiencing people I wouldn't have crossed paths with if I was just staying in a small bubble, is that when you go off the beaten path, you do something that is outside the norm, you are more likely to connect faster and have a richer sense of relationship with people who are also in that same boat. So I think about it, even just people who post on TikTok, it's so difficult for me to exist in life around people who are not artists, who are not creators, who are not action doers. They are not people who are reading books. It's very difficult for me to exist because I'm like, oh, you don't see me. You don't, straight people. It's so difficult to be around straight people. And a lot of my long lasting friendships have been straight people. And I always wonder, why doesn't, why are we growing apart? Or why does this kind of like push in a direction that I don't feel like we're on the same page? We're not very attuned. We're not very aligned. And it's because we just don't see the world the same way. And I'm not saying that you need everyone to see the world the same way as you. I think that on TikTok, I would get content, and I would intentionally follow content that wasn't exactly aligned with me. I had mutuals who I'm like, ooh, I don't know that I agree with this, but I also think that this perspective is thought provoking. I think that we get into these mindsets that everyone around us needs to be exactly like us, but like, how fucking boring would that be? That would be so boring if we were always around people who were yes men and agreed with us. And that's exactly what Trump wants. Trump wants yes men so that he can just do whatever he wants. He doesn't want to be challenged. He doesn't want to be held accountable. Same with employers. They want their employees to just yep, 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 I'll be exploited, I'll be exploited, I'll be exploited. And the minute you go, I don't really think I want to be exploited anymore. I'm going to work my wage. I'm going to do with it what's within my job description, and I'm going to stand up for myself. They go, magnifying glass on you. You're the op. You're the bad one. You're the one who's taking advantage. You're doing this. You're doing that. We're going to find a way to push you out. It's, as long as you are controllable, you are automatically a threat. And to me, I'm like, I would rather go find the other threats to the system, the other people who are carving new lives for themselves. And it's going to be harder. It's going to be challenging. It's going to be scary, especially since the older generation didn't do that as much. The older generation had a more prosperous reality. They were able to buy homes more freely. They were able to have a more thriving job market. They were able to do a lot of these things that I think the younger generation isn't able to do. And of course, there's nuance to that there has always been disadvantages across the board. But I think looking at reality, we have normalized so much of what goes on that we don't even question enough, because we're just trying to get through the day to day. We're so preoccupied by existing. We're so preoccupied of where's my next dollar going to come, because my next dollar means that I can eat. Or if we're just chronically renting, we're always going to have to chase the next paycheck. And I think that's exactly where they want us to be. That's exactly where men want us to be, is constantly chasing their validation and their acceptance and their this and their that, because they're doing that with men too. They're the first ones to be begging for men's attention. This is exactly what I'm seeing with Trump and the administration and the people that he's surrounding themselves with, and Mark Zuckerberg going on Joe Rogan and saying the neutering of corporate culture, or like masculinity and masculine energy and X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, these are the least masculine people I have seen in a very long time. Trump wants to do his inauguration inside because it's too cold, or at least that's the narrative that they're providing. But if that's true, how fucking masculine is it to be, oh, I can't stand out in the cold, but I also don't believe in the climate crisis, and this is the first time ever that it's going to be too cold for us to do this outside. Like, I think being a neurodivergent person, this is what drives me nuts, is that you see all of the inconsistencies and you go, well, why does it have to be this way? Why does it have to be inefficient? Why is there inequality between men and women? Why is there inequality between races? Why is there inequality between neurodivergent and neurotypical people and straight people versus queer people? Why? Why does that exist? Who does that benefit? And oftentimes it doesn't even benefit the people that are perpetuating it. I don't think that it benefits straight people really, really all that much to be anti-queer people. Like, what does that do? That makes you feel safe? Do you really think that queer people are taking away from you in a way? I've read a book that is called Strangers in Their Own Land, and I don't know if it was exactly that book or maybe it was The Righteous Mind. It was one of the two, where it talks about how, like, people being in line, people don't want other people to cut them in line. So, like, for example, if straight people might subconsciously perceive that if queer people are allowed to have rights, then therefore straight people are worse off, in the same way that, like, if men thinking that if women have rights, have equal opportunity, have access to spaces that men have dominated in the past, like men are somehow going without, when in actuality there is enough for everyone to go around. But we are so programmed by like authoritative environments and authoritative systems that they can't even fathom sharing the space. So sharing space to them seems like they're being taken from, when in actuality, no, you're simply just sharing and you don't have ownership and claim over something you didn't earn. That is the biggest part, is that you didn't earn. And when thinking about the TikTok ban, people go, okay, well, you posted on TikTok, like, did you really earn it? And it's like, what's the line? What's the line? Who gets to decide if you worked hard enough for your money in a way that men can also show up? I think about women dominating the influencer marketing space, dominating the content creator space, dominating the TikTok space. Men can get on just the same. Men can post similar content. Men can do that, but they don't do that. And why don't they do that? Why don't they do that? Why does it not land when men do it just the same? And men will go, oh, okay, well, then that happens in our industries as well, that we're dominating. And it's like, no, you actually actively left us out. That's why you're dominating. Let's see what that looks like when you're not actively leaving us out. Let's see what our voices sound like when we're not stripped away of our rights. What then? What is life going to look like then when we are equal? Because they're so fearful that women are going to do what men have done from the beginning of time. This is so prevalent, and why white people are so scared of reverse racism, because they're so terrified that the global majority is going to do to white people what white people have been doing to them from the beginning. It's an omission of guilt oftentimes. And I think that when we start realizing that these oppressors and these oppressive systems, like, they are not necessarily as powerful as we think they may be. Like, I have to take a step back and I have to go, okay, where is my power of choice? Of course, these like really interwoven, like bigger systems are so far out of our control on an individual level. But like, if you look at your own life, I'm like, where am I giving my power away? When am I not being confident? When am I allowing my employer to step on my toes? When am I allowing my employer to extract value from me? When am I allowing the people in my life, if I'm dating men, take advantage of me? When am I crossing my boundaries and giving up parts of myself? It's like an always ever evolving, questioning internal reflection of like, how can this be better for me? How can I make this reality more comfortable for me? How can I protect myself? I think that's how we started this episode, is how can we best protect ourselves? That is the question of the hour. And I think that remaining silent when you have the space to speak up is not going to protect you. So with that being said, I think that this podcast is something that I have wanted to do for months, but I just have been hesitant to literally get behind the camera and start recording. But I'm so happy to be back. I'm so happy to be back behind the microphone. And it might not be celery talks. We might not be just talking about health and wellness, but we are talking about things that really affect a woman's life. And I'm very curious and eager to keep the conversation going. I'm hoping that I can find the people that really resonate and want to talk about these things, want to create action items on how we can better our lives. And I'm just very grateful for the time and opportunity in the community that I had on TikTok. And I'm eager to have that again and build that again and invite people in again on a different platform. I don't think that it maybe is going to be as seamless or as easy or as fruitful overnight, because I know that some of these spaces are just not very pro woman, but I think that it isn't impossible, but we shall see. I could be naive in that regard, because I mean, as a woman, it already is difficult to exist, but I think that we are baby stepwise making change. We're making change in our own mind. We're creating space for us to think about things in ways that we haven't before. And I will always be an advocate for women. I will always be an advocate for minorities. I will always be someone who is going to question the system and question why things are the way they are, and then really invite new thinking and new ways. So I will see you next time, and we'll figure out what's left.